We're now live on YouTube, guys.
Right, well, it is 6 o'clock and we've 4 councillors, so we are quorate, so we can make a start. So first of all, substitutes nominated for this meeting, and apologies for absence.
There is Councillor Dacre substituting for Councillor Scullion, Chair, and Councillor Scullion has sent her apologies.
Remind members to declare an interest as and where necessary on the either now or whenever it comes up on the agenda. It's all the items are open to the public. Item 4, minutes of the meetings of the Audit Committee on the 19th and 30th of November. Does anybody have any comments or observations on either of those 2 minutes?
No, I'm happy to propose them as a correct record, Chair.
Right, is that seconded? Yeah, I'll second it then. So all those in favour? That's okay. Thank you.
Chair, it was just that I wasn't at both of them, so
yeah.
So that's I didn't second it, and that's why I hesitated when I voted. But I'm sure they're all right.
Yeah, right. So move on to item 5, review of challenge of strategic risks. Martin.
Thank you, Chair. The report brought to you today considers updates to the strategic risk register, looking in more detail at the strategic risk of failure to address obesity and poor health, and ask members to consider what information they wish to see with regard to the presentation of the Directorate Risk Register to this committee in the future. Since the last report to this committee, the impact of the COVID pandemic has continued. Has continued to dominate the media, with increasing numbers of infections and the appearance of new strains, leading to a national lockdown from the 5th of January. A month and a half into the lockdown period, we've seen the numbers of new infections decrease. This is due to a number of influences, including the completion of the vaccination of the top 4 groups, the regular testing for frontline staff through lateral flow testing, identifying infections through the national test and trace process, and the review of individual staff risk assessments to ensure that all staff work in safely as possible and reduce exposure to any of the new strains. In addition, the impacts of the COVID pandemic will continue to have an amplification effect on some of the risks of leaving the EU. With regard to leaving the EU following the agreement of the trade deal on the 24th of December 2020, the end of the transition period on the 31st of December, a review of the Council's leaving the EU risk and impact assessment identified that while the free trade agreement has removed the identified risks of the imposition of tariffs and barriers to trade, the significant risks will continue into 2021 and beyond. Examples of this are the EU settlement scheme, where the final figures for those who have and have not applied will not become known until July 2021, which is the last date for applications. And also farming, where the change from the EU direct payments to grant payments from the UK over a 7-year period will disproportionately impact on small-scale upland farmers and tenant farmers. We also brought Strategic Risk 017, which is failure to deliver effective interventions to tackle obesity and poor health. Obesity is one of the biggest health crises the country faces. 2/3 of adults in England are overweight or obese, and 1 in 3 children leaving primary school are overweight or obese. with obesity-related illnesses costing the NHS £6 billion a year. It is known that obesity reduces life expectancy, increases the chance of serious diseases, and also puts individuals at more risk of worse outcomes from the coronavirus. There's no simple answer to tackling obesity, as the influences on the obesity are social, economic, and environmental. And to be effective, strategies to support health must address these fundamental determinants rather than be limited to promoting healthy behaviours individual. However, failing to address obesity and ill health will increase pressure on those health and social care service resources at a time when those resources are already heavily stretched with dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. As this is the last strategic risk to be presented to this committee, and as agreed at last meeting, is proposed to bring the Council's Directorate Risk Register futures meetings of the Audit Committee in a similar format. It was proposed because it would provide detailed information on those risks which make up the Directorate Register and why they're on those registers. It will also detail the actions that are being taken and how the Directorate Registers and the Council's Strategic Risk Register link together. Members are asked to confirm that they are in agreement with the proposal to present a Directorate Risk Register to the next 6 audit committees. Do members ask to ask questions on the report now or after the presentation by the Director of Public Health, please?
Right, does anybody want to raise any points at this stage? I think we ought to ask questions on the public health after Deborah's given a case, if that's okay with everybody. But
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do all the questions after the presentation, Chair.
Fine, yeah. Shall we just clear up for future meetings? We'll look through the Director's Register for Martin. Are we all still happy with that?
Yes, we can bring, they would come to the next 6. There's 6 Directorate Registers which we brought to the next 6 meetings. Yes. Similar sort of format, a detailed presentation by the lead officer for the Director's Register, and also it would give members assurance of what was being carried out, how it linked into the Strategic Risk Register, and also what actions were being taken to ensure that new risks were picked up and how they were cascaded through the Directorate.
So we are all okay with that, are we?
Agree.
That as yes. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much. So Deborah, do you want to kick off? Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I think as Martin says, it's really important to understand that obesity is a really complex issue. It's really challenging. It's influenced by lots and lots of different issues in terms of the economy, the environment, poverty, living conditions, the design of the environment. Lots and lots of sort of complex factors influence obesity, and there's no single organisation and even no level really of working that will tackle this on its own. So it needs a real partnership of work between a national level and a local level, and actually a community level as well. So what I thought it'd be worth doing is just highlighting perhaps some of the issues and perhaps some of the impacts around COVID, the COVID pandemic and obesity particularly. The links between the action to tackle obesity and our priorities as an organisation, and then just say a little bit about some of the things that we're doing in Calderdale to try and tackle obesity. If that's okay, Chair, but I won't speak for long, I promise. So first of all, I think it's really important that we think about obesity in the context of COVID. I think there's good evidence, isn't there, that people that are overweight or obese, particularly people that are clinically obese, higher risk of poorer outcomes if they actually get COVID. So that makes it an even more sort of urgent and important issue at the moment. I think the other challenge is that a number of the services and interventions that we carry out to sort of promote healthy weight and reduce obesity have been impacted by lockdowns and by our ability to deliver face-to-face frontline support and services as well. And I'll come on and say a little bit about some of those. We also know that when we look at physical activity, we've done some local research and we've found that when we look at the impact of COVID on people's being physically active, which we know is really important in preventing obesity. What we've actually seen is that inequalities have increased. So people that were already active before the COVID pandemic are more active now. The pandemic's made them more active, and those that were less active, the pandemic's made them even less active, and that's another channel. And so much of that is because of the local environment, and the evidence is really clear that the biggest predictors of whether people are active or not is whether they feel safe in the local environment and whether they feel satisfied with the local environment, whether it's attractive and appealing. Actually, things like leisure centres and leisure services have no impact on physical activity levels at all. What they're great at is people that are active already are often even more active if they can get access to a really good leisure facilities. So I think that there are a number of the sort of challenges in relation to overweight and obesity that because of the sort of COVID pandemic. I think the other thing that's really important to be aware of, I guess, is the links between action to address obesity and the council's priorities. So there are enormous inequalities in obesity, first of all. Obesity is much more prevalent in more deprived areas than in more affluent areas. So the council's aspiration to reducing, to tackle inequality is really important in terms of obesity. We also know that active travel, growing your own food, eating a plant-based diet, a number of factors that are consistent with our carbon emergency, carbon reduction aspirations, can also positively impact on obesity as well. And finally, the design of the environment around town centres and how we use town centres can also positively impact on obesity. So we're really lucky in Calderdale that we've got our Active Calderdale programme. As you know, that's a partnership with Sport England that's led to significant investment of about £2.5 million. And the aim of that is really to systematise physical activity in Calderdale, to make physical activity easy for us. And it really, the focus is on inactive people who don't do any physical activity at all, getting those people more active. And that's really the focus on that. So there's a lot of work that we're doing around that, particularly working with vulnerable groups. So working with our partners in the NHS and working with social care to enable people that live in or that receive social care, receive health services to embed physical activity in that, to promote obesity, prevent obesity. So I think that's really important. But what we're also doing through Active Calderdale is work to look at how we can design the local environment, work with communities to design local environments and create local environments that make it as easy as possible for people to be active, whether that's using parks, walking, encouraging people to be active outdoors, which is obviously permitted in lockdowns as well. So they're really important. So we are working with people like Rob and planners to think about how we can create what we call livable neighbourhoods, where it's as easy as possible for people to be active. The second chunk of work that's really important that we're doing relates to the links between poverty and obesity. So all the work that we're doing around Never Hungry, the Never Hungry Again campaign, making sure people have got access, particularly children, but vulnerable families, low-income families, have got access to the resources that they need for nutritious, healthy food. And to be able to afford nutritious, healthy food is really, really important. And we've got the Food for All approach through our community food network is really reorientating the work it's doing to focus on the impact of poverty on being able to eat healthily and eat well. And that's a really strong focus of our work. And then finally, the work that we're doing around services, so the support that we give to people that are overweight and obese to help them become a healthy weight. So when the first national lockdown was implemented, we did see some of the face-to-face services, both health checks and also some of the services that the Better Living Service provide for people to be a healthy weight. We're in the process of reinstating and reviewing and reinstating the sort of face-to-face elements of some of those services. In the meantime, we did offer all of the people that we were working with support for the virtual Slimming World sessions, which are done through Zoom and done remotely, so that people who have set themselves targets to lose weight or become more of a healthy weight can get support from others, but do it in a way that's COVID secure and safe. As I say, we're starting to reintroduce the sessions the Better Living Service we're providing, just on a smaller scale, and looking to do that where we can remotely. And that's because Slimming World, those commercial weight loss programs don't work for everybody, and sometimes we need to take a more targeted approach and offer, as well as the sort of the group sessions and recipes, sometimes offer a little bit more support in terms of sort of psychology and help with behaviour change. So ultimately, I think that's all I wanted to say. I'm conscious people, members will have questions and comments to make. So just to recap, really complex, lots of work around the communities we live in and the environment that will really impact on a sustainable basis on being a healthy weight, work around poverty and food, and finally looking at delivering the services and the support for people to help them lose weight in ways that are COVID secure, and starting to reinstate face-to-face where that's absolutely essential. So I'll stop there, Chair, if that's okay.
Right, thank you, Deborah. That was a very good introduction. Thank you. I think my doctor would possibly say that I ought to have declared an interest for being overweight, but he's never succeeded into getting me to lose any more weight. So, are there any comments anybody wishes to make, or questions? Yes, Sylvia.
I think James was before me. To be strictly.
I don't mind if you want to go first. I'll be.
Okay.
We'll get a chance.
Yeah. So just in relation to environment, that's presumably about trying to. Presumably, people when you say they don't want to go out because their environment isn't conducive, is that to do with traffic and fear of traffic, or to do with fear of who else might be on the streets, or is it to do with believing that actually it's a lousy environment anyway to be on? Do you know what it is that it puts people off going out in their local areas?
Yeah, I mean, it does depend on the different area, but that broad feeling of, if you feel safe and if you feel the environment is attractive, you're much more likely to go out and be active on a sustainable basis. But it really does depend on each community. So that's why it's so important to work with local residents, because the issues in one particular community will be different to another. So for example, in some areas, it's about the amount of traffic, it's about the numbers of the cars on the road. For some communities, it will be fear of crime, and for some areas it will because it looks grotty and looks unattractive, and it doesn't encourage you to get out and enjoy the environment. So there's often different reasons, and what's really works really well, and what we want to do through Livable Neighbourhoods, is actually work with local communities to understand their perceptions and their views about what would encourage them to get out and use the environment to be active. And I think that will depend on, as I say, on the unique circumstances in different communities.
Right. James, you want to?
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for the presentation, Deborah. I mean, I personally, I really love like hearing about how we think about the environment rather than just the kind of the individual responsibility for health, because I think for so much, you know from the statistics of people living in certain areas that those health inequalities are related to the place and they're related to poverty rather than just it's not just a case of, oh, you should just lose some weight or you should just do some exercise. It's more holistic than that and about the kind of interactions with communities and their places. It seems like so long ago, I think it's 2014, I did like a scrutiny review into public health and the environment. The only thing that I kind of think of is there's so many risks out there in terms of health, and quite often the risks that we're focused on at any one point in time is the risk that is almost, the trend in public health, or the trend that, so obesity is very a popular thing we're all aware of. And then suddenly someone become aware of there's this other risk, like air pollution. Actually, for years, it was on, we never really even thought about it. But now, there's research around even using like a gas appliance for cooking or not having proper ventilation in the kitchen. And you kind of feel like with COVID, it was almost like one of those things that kind of blindsided a lot of people, although, the pandemic strategic risk was there on the council's risk register. It was all focused on flu rather than other viruses. And you now wonder, I guess what my question is like, what are the kind of risks that we're not focused on, which are probably out there, but we need to kind of somehow like use our like collective big brains to think of and do something about. And it may even be harder to access funding for those things because it's not on the government's radar as much. So I wonder, for me, like in terms of like going out and it being attractive, I think there's probably quite a link between things like noise and noise mapping the borough, and just like cleanliness as well. Like if it's litter and fly tipping or dog mess, how that impacts on your mental health and well-being. So I think there's a lot of stuff around this to look at. So that's kind of one point on the actual comment. And then I guess the other thing is in terms of like how we manage this risk. Like at your senior leadership team, then when there's a kind of cabinet paper coming forward, do you kind of look at that strategic risk and think, well, how is this decision potentially going to impact on this strategic risk? Because that's what worries me sometimes. I think I've said this before, but we write down this strategic risk register and then we go off somewhere else and make decisions without thinking about how those decisions impact on those risks. And one reason, like the Mixed Activity Centre, the risk of closing, I know there's a meeting and hopefully a plan to have some future for it, but on the one hand we're trying to do all this stuff to tackle obesity, and then due to our revenue problems we're kind of cutting something where people can go and do activity. So I just wonder really at what stage do we kind of go, right, actually this is a red flag on the strategic risk register, this decision, we need to not do something different. So I went on a little bit long then, but hopefully the point was clear enough.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Yes, one of the things that will become apparent is the fact that on the Directorate risk registers, there's quite a few of these risks, such as what happens if we close Vixen and Adventure Play area. So I think hopefully that they'll get picked up, and you'll see that as we start to bring the Directorate risk registers through. But I appreciate your point that it is easy to miss out on some things because you're focusing on the bigger picture of COVID. And I know when you talk about air pollution, that wasn't a problem, such a problem until recently. There was a court case which proved that air pollution had actually severely injured a child where she lived. And that, of course, has now focused everyone's minds on how air pollution can actually affect people. So yes, these things will get picked up, and we have got one of these strategic risk registers now. We'll also look at atmospheric pollution and how we're dealing with it, particularly through the West Yorkshire Transport Fund and improving roads to try and move some of the pollution away from the centres of Calderdale.
Thank you. Stephen,
Thank you, Chair. Got a couple of points. The first one, I think, for Martin as much as Deb, but I'm sure Deb would want to comment, particularly about risk. I don't know if anybody's seen this latest thing. There was a serious documentary on in the last week or so about the advantages of nighttime exercise. I don't know if anybody saw it. and there was a couple of people jogging, you know, when it was very dark and very quiet, and saying that the benefits of this is tremendous because there's less traffic at the time, and you know it's lovely and all of those things. And I was immediately alarmed by it because, you know, people that could be safely at home, you know, running around in a dark night brings other risks which probably outweigh the benefits of this experience of exercising at night. So I don't know how you would evaluate that, Martin, if that was a growing thing. And it did seem that there was a lot of people seriously advocating that. And the other thing, I'll couple this. Nowadays, is it a big thing, experts on fluid dynamics, where fluid is air as opposed to literally fluids, are doing work on residential dwellings, saying that what's good for CO2 emissions in terms of insulation and other steps that are taken in making a house more insulated and emitting less CO2 is actually quite bad for the residents if the air movement in the property isn't as it should be. So these are a couple of new things that could be potentially gaining credence. And how would that affect our risk analyses?
Councillor, yeah, I can certainly answer the first one. That yes, I haven't seen the programme, and I'm not aware of there being an increase in night running, but a lot of clubs do actually run at nights because for the very reasons that things are, but they do take precautions. I mean, if you ever watch the Halifax Harriers running at night, they've all got lights on, they've got lights to be able to see where they're going. So I think one of the things to do is if you're going to encourage nighttime running, then you need to also ensure that you encourage taking, you know, safety, not running on main roads, not running on unlit areas, and also making sure that you're well lit so that people can see you. As to the second one, sorry, yes, I'll have to look into that. I'm not aware of the fluid dynamics of the CO2, but I'll look into it and get back to you on that one if that's okay. Thank you.
Chair, may I respond as well to Councillor Baker's question about the other risks? I'm not going to get my crystal ball out and try and identify risks that we haven't thought about. But what I would say, I think it's a really, really good question. And I think what I would say from a health perspective, from a public health perspective, is I think what this pandemic has really taught us is that actually that the root causes and the determinants of a wide range of the impacts of a wide range of health issues, including COVID, actually are the same, irrespective of what the health concern is. So we've talked today about obesity and the links with the environment and poverty. We know that COVID is impacting communities that live in more densely populated areas, that are working in less lower income roles particularly, and inequalities is impacting on COVID. It impacts on obesity, impacts on air quality. And actually when we start to look at these different health concerns, actually they often have the same root causes or very similar root causes, and actually they're the things that we should be addressing if we're going to future proof and reduce risk in terms of the impacts of health problems and health concerns. So inequalities, poverty, the quality of the local environment, work, these all influence all of the health concerns that we're spending our time worrying about and working to address at the moment.
Are there any other questions or observations? Yes, Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. Really just looking at the headline on Appendix B is that we're looking at the possibility to the outcomes of the failure to deliver effective interventions to tackle obesity and poor health. It's very impressive to see all these things which are happening, which is all good stuff. It's we understand it's a complex issue and it needs to be attacked from lots of different directions, which I think is absolutely right. And it's good to see those things happening. I think my only question, in addition to what's been said so far, is are we doing regular analysis of the effect that this is having? Are we actually reducing obesity? Are we actually improving the quality of health? And there's a regular ongoing thing in that sense that we can see what's more effective and so on. Thank you.
I mean, I think unfortunately, obesity is increasing in most age groups. And yes, we keep a really close eye on monitoring it. I think we need to work smarter on us monitoring those determinants and understanding more about the determinants and the impact of the things that we're doing. Because there's no one single thing that we can do to reduce obesity, it's very hard for us to sort of understand and measure the success, other than by monitoring obesity in the population, which we do. So I do think some of the interventions that we're developing, and particularly some of the work we're doing around the environment and the poverty agenda, it's going to be really important that we develop some indicators so that we know if it's having the impact that we want it to have. So I think that's a really good question, Councillor Evans.
Thank you. Any further comments? Right. I'd just like to express my thanks for the teams who actually have reduced the risk for our staff, especially the frontline staff who are meeting the general public, etc., for what they've done, and of course what all our teams who are out there visiting residents for whatever reason, who are continuing to take that risk, but I think doing an excellent job, and we ought to thank them for that. So thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the terms of reference for the audit committee. Is that you, Lisa, again?
No, that's me, Chair. Ian Hughes. Thank you. Members will probably recall that this is an item that comes around about this time every year. It's a very straightforward report on this occasion. Just a need to make sure that there's been a review undertaken, which there has, of this committee's terms of reference, and the recommendation is to approve them as they currently are. Members may recall they went through a slight amendment. I don't think it was last year, the year before, just picking up some SIPFA recommendations. Those have been incorporated. They've been reviewed as they've worked over the last year. And again, I'm recommending that they continue for a further year.
Right, well, I'll move that we do accept that recommendation. Is everybody all in favour of that? Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Next one's progress report, annual governance statement. Are you? I'll get it right this time. Will Lisa, if I say you?
Chair, could we just take the revised audit plan item first? Yeah, thank you. The report presented tonight shows the revision to the audit plan. This year, because of COVID, we have been keeping members up to date with how we're tackling the audit plan. We did report back in August last year that we were taking a much more flexible and fluid approach because of the other duties which the internal audit team were working on. So you have been kept advised, and in compliance with public sector internal audit standards, we have been continually reviewing the plan. On the table 1 of Appendix A is listed the additional work which the internal audit team have been doing, which wasn't foreseen when the audit plan was originally put together. The main work that they've undertaken is in relation to the COVID grants, both the initial ones on small business and retail hospitality, but then the second round of COVID grants on the local restriction support grants. So a significant amount of time has been undertaken with those, plus the post-assurance work required for those in addition. just to formally set out to members, table 2 of the appendix shows the actual audits that we're proposing to defer for this year. All of them will be reconsidered for the audit plan in 21-22. We have discussed all the audits with directorate management teams and directors, and prioritised the ones where directors feel as though the audit needed to be conducted in this year, or where we had a view that we needed to undertake the audit this year. So in agreement with directors, those others have been deferred until next year. So the recommendation is for members to approve the revised audit plan. I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Are there any questions or observations? Yes, Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. More an observation, really. I totally understand the pressure put on by COVID and therefore the changes to things. I suppose it's just registering a concern in a sort of strategic risk sense, if you like, that a wide spectrum of directorates have had things put back. And I suppose, do we need to be concerned about that? I'm not sure what we can do about it, but you know, is it an area of concern in a strategic risk sense?
Thank you, Councillor Evans. It's not an area of concern, and we have looked at the entire audit universe, if you like, to ensure that at the end of the year I can give assurance and an opinion across the board. So although we are deferring audits from across the organisation, we've also conducted audits across the organisation. So there's nothing being flagged up as any areas of concern, and I will be able to provide an opinion at the end of the year based on the work that we have conducted.
Right, thank you. Any other comments, observations? Right, so thanks very much for that. So we now move on to the annual government state.
Thank you, Councillor Burns. This is the usual report which updates members on the progress made on the significant issues in the annual governance statement for last year. You'll recall at the last meeting, Rob Summerfield, who's in attendance this evening, and Mark Cole did attend to give a presentation on the progress being made on the revision to the project management arrangements. Rob has provided an update on the current position, which you will see is at 5.2 and 5.3 of the report. And he has confirmed that they remain on target for the 1st of April 21 to go live with the new revised governance approach. And there are other targets to be met as the year continues. I've also included an update in terms of the COVID pandemic and the meetings which are taking place, and the digital platforms to manage that. Again, happy to take any questions on the progress. If you don't have any questions, I'd ask members to note the progress being made on those issues.
Are there any questions or observations? No, so I take it that we're all happy with the progress that's being made, but thank you for that, Lisa. And we'll move on to the selected internal report, the culture.
Thank you, Chair. Lachlan will present this one to members.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the report presented to members is about the audit of culture, which hasn't been one of the easiest subjects for us to undertake an audit on. But it is generally accepted that a negative organisational culture can significantly affect the organisation's ability to achieve its objectives. So we felt it was important to look at this subject. just to put things in context, I've just got a couple of definitions here of organisational culture that might help. The first one is essentially organisational culture is the values, behaviours and shared vision that contribute to the environment of an organisation. And the second definition I've got is an organisation's culture defines the proper way to behave within the organisation. This culture consists of shared beliefs and values established by leaders and then communicated and reinforced through various methods, ultimately shaping employee perceptions, behaviours and understanding. So in order to try and determine what the position is in Calderdale, we consider those things that we believe the council should have in place to encourage a positive culture. And the report was broken down into the mission, values and behaviours and vision 2024, ethics, whistleblowing, shared conversations and role of officers, members. And for each area of the audit, we considered whether there was appropriate documentation of standards, policies and procedures, whether there was good communication and training, and whether there was adequate management monitoring, for example, through staff surveys and exit interviews. In addition, the auditor also liaised with the responsible officers for the main corporate governance areas for their views on the culture within the council. And overall, we found that there were sound arrangements for a positive culture within the council. We didn't find any evidence of any negative elements that would cause concern. There were a few procedures that needed to be tightened up and recommendations were made, and the majority of these have actually been implemented. If members have any questions on the audit report, then we're happy to respond.
Are there any questions? Yes, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question to ask in regards to that. As you know, we have a standards committee, and certainly one of the policies was renewed at a recent meeting, which was code of conduct for, I think it was just for councillors, but I think it was a general code of conduct as well for all of us. And so just to say that is being looked at as a separate issue in another committee, and I don't know if there's an overlap or whether they are indeed separate issues entirely.
Yeah, I think the code of conduct, we looked at the code of conduct for members and staff, and they're obviously important elements in terms of having a good culture within the council. The member code of conduct, I believe, is being updated in line with government guidance, which has recently been issued. I think that was the reason for the members code being updated.
Right, James, did you want to speak?
Yeah, just quickly. So one of the things mentioned in that was around the whistleblower report. I can't remember. I can remember once seeing something like that, but is that something that occasionally comes to audit?
That is,
I guess it'd be an exempt item, wouldn't it? But
that is one of the recommendations that we've made in the report, that a regular report, it does go to members on the whistleblowing items that have been referred to the monitoring officer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a good thing to put onto the work plan every so often. I mean, you wouldn't have to look at it every meeting, perhaps, would you? But a kind of yearly report, perhaps, in the same way. I think, do we have like the complaints report goes, is it governance and business? You have a complaints style report, don't you? But
are we all okay with that going forward? Do we accept that?
Yeah.
You? Any other comments or observations?
That's good.
No. Well, thanks very much for that, Lachlan. That's very good. Thank you.
I wanted to say something.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just about culture. To some degree, is such an intangible thing. and a sort of esprit de corps. And for your ordinary staff, the way you measure it presumably is through the staff survey. That's the only way you have of gauging how the lower levels, if I could use that word, how they perceive it. And do you feel that if it's anything like the staff survey that was inflicted upon my previous employment, it would have given you, I think, an extremely warped view of the organisation? Are you happy that your staff survey actually does accurately capture culture in this way?
I think it's just one way of really of capturing information regarding what staff feel. I mean, another way that we use is exit interviews for leavers, when they probably feel freer to say what they really feel. And there's also shared conversations which should be undertaken between managers and staff on a monthly and quarterly basis. And themes should become clear from those.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
James, do you want to say something?
Perhaps we could do like that reality TV show, Undercover Boss. We could dress up members of the audit committee to go on the front line and find out what the culture of the council is like. So that would be another way of doing it. But no, it's a challenge for anyone in a senior position to actually know what the culture of the organisation is and what people genuinely feel at the grassroots. And you have to try and engender, a situation where people feel comfortable and people are free to raise their concerns or criticisms without reproach. And that's part of having a healthy, self-reflective organisation that is focusing on self-improvement, isn't it?
Right, thank you for that. Any other comments or observations? Okay, well, thank you again, Lachlan. Thank you.
Welcome.
So on to item 11, internal audit services.
Sorry, Councillor Baines, are we on item 10, my internet connection?
Sorry, we've dealt with that one. Have we? No? No, yeah. Item 10 then. Yeah.
Item 10, thank you, Chair. The report that I've presented summarises an opinion put forward by CIPFA to standardise terminology and definitions in engagement opinions. This is basically when internal audit issue a report and we issue an audit opinion. Although CIPFA say it's not mandated to have standardised definitions, it's stated that if an organisation doesn't want to have those standardised, that it must be discussed with the audit committee and get an agreement on why. So the report summarises what CIPFA recommend as to the definitions. Those are detailed in 5.2. You'll note that there are 4 opinions there. We usually have 3. My view is that we would never use the 4th of no assurance. I can't ever remember an occasion when we wouldn't be able to give any assurance at all. So we would, in my view, still have 3. I've also included in 4.2 just a reminder of what we use at Calderdale. CIPFA state that the opinion should be meaningful and understandable to the user and consistently applied. In my view, that's what we have in Calderdale anyway. They are understandable and they are consistently applied. However, if audit committee members want to move to using the standard definitions recommended by CIPFA, I don't have a problem with that. They document their advantages to having the standardised ones. These are CIPFA's view, which I don't disagree that those are the good reasons for having the standard opinions, but I would suggest that we've got standard opinions anyway. So it's a view from members. Do we want to move to the standard opinions recommended by CIPFA? And if we do, I suggest we would start using them from the 1st of April so that we've got the same definitions throughout a financial year. Or are you happy to remain with the opinions that we already have in place at Calderdale?
Yeah, I personally feel it would be better to stick with the recommendation of CIPFA. I think we usually tend to follow the suggestions from CIPFA. So it's, has anybody else any comments? Or yes, Stephen.
Yes, on that one, I take Lisa's point. The fourth option of no assurance is somewhere where you say, you know, we've never been. And I would have imagined, had we still been using our 3 definitions, I think there would have been a commentary about something so weak that, you know, there was a feeling of no assurance. But I think generally, if there are guidelines that are given and everybody else is now using the 4, you know, effectively we could still be using R3 because, as you've said, Lisa, we've never got to that point, but it would emphasise that there was a serious problem if ever anything fell into that category.
James, did you indicate?
I did, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do quite like our kind of almost traffic light style system. I think it's quite clear to understand. I don't think their ones are quite as good, but I do take their points about the benefits of standardisation. If different local authorities are doing it and different auditors are looking at it, and you're comparing things across different public bodies, that does to me make sense. So for that reason, I think we should probably move to it. But I wondered if when we write up the reports and colour them, whether we can kind of stick to having, you know, have the bottom 2 red and then the middle one red, orange and green, so we still kind of have some kind of simple grasp of it, because actually the wording of it is not, it makes it, to me it just seems a little less clear from a layperson's perspective. Yeah, thanks.
Yes, I totally agree, and I will propose to use the same colour coding as you suggest.
Right, so yes, Sylvia, sorry.
Thank you. So I just wanted to be sure, and I'm sure from what you've said it's the case, you don't have to go back and redo the ones you've done. You only do it as you're going along, because then, yeah, that's fine.
Yes, absolutely. And by having the colour coding as well, I suggest we've got something to compare to, because we usually compare last year to this year, so we can still show where we've got movement if we're sticking with the same colour. If we called it adequate, we'd now call it reasonable assurance, so you can see whether it's changed or not.
Right. So are we all okay with that? Everybody seems to be in agreement, yes. So, right, thank you. We'll move on to internal audit report.
Thank you, Chair. This is the usual tracking report, which summarises for members all the audits which have been conducted in the current financial year, and shows the progress in implementing recommendations and the revised opinion after the follow-up. There's nothing I feel as though I need to highlight to you of any concern. Members usually select a report to be the member selected report for the next meeting. There aren't any new weak audits on the report. I'm happy for members to suggest one of the reports. If members don't have a suggestion, mine would be markets. It was previously a weak audit, and it has moved to adequate when we did the audit. I have to say it was a little borderline, but we gave adequate, and it's now improved to sound because they have implemented all the recommendations according to their response. But happy to take other suggestions from members.
You must have been reading my mind, because that's what I was going to suggest as well, Lisa. I thought that would be good to see how one has gone from very low to very high. You know, so it's I think that would be good. Does anybody else have any opinions on that? Are we all happy with that? That's great. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Lisa. So we'll move on to the last one now, the Audit Committee work plan.
Thank you, Chair. I've just programmed in here the standard reports that we have throughout the year. Happy to add anything else in if members have any suggestions. At the previous session we had with members, we talked about the self-assessment, which will be coming to the May meeting, and we also discussed potentially some other reports looking at the value added by the Audit Committee, which I'll programme into a future meeting.
Right. Yes, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. There's just one I thought that we might wish to consider, Lisa, and that's the grant claims and returns. It's a national issue where, you know, there has been some fraud, and I think it would be good to look at what's been happening in Calderdale. Hopefully it doesn't reflect some of the bad things that have been happening elsewhere, but I think it's a situation that's left us particularly vulnerable because of the sheer volume of claims and the substantiation of the claims. So that might be one to look at.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Could I just clarify which type of grant claims you're referring to? Is it the COVID?
For example, there's been a number of exposés on the TV about people supposedly selling, you know, ready for grant claim businesses, and that they're nothing like they purport to be. And there's allegations that very large amounts of money have been claimed by people looking for the main chance. So some of the business grants and loans and so on, I think, have been pointed out, proven to be very highly suspect.
Okay, no problem.
Any other thoughts or observations? Yes, James.
I just thought if we could schedule in when we're going to have that report on whistleblowing into the plan now, then we can get that sorted. I was trying to look through and see which of the meetings planned had a lighter agenda, and to give a bit of time to do it as well.
Councillor Baker, I will discuss with Ian Hughes whether that will be coming to this meeting or whether it will be going to governance and business. But if it's going to come to this meeting, I will schedule it in to the agendas moving forward.
Okay, yeah.
Any other issues? I just thought, would it be useful if we haven't sorted out an independent member for the Audit Committee to bring back a report with possible suggestions about we can try and encourage somebody to join us, and whether, you know, to consider whether we ought to offer some remuneration, because we didn't get anywhere with saying they won't get anything for it. Would members be happy with that? James?
Yeah, no, I'd be happy with that. I mean, I think we have to try and look at some other options if no one's come forward. It's a little bit, you wonder if, like, you know, the pandemic might impact on things a bit there, but it looks like we probably will have to offer them something, perhaps, doesn't it?
I agree.
And that would be in line with, you know, independent person standards as well, wouldn't it? They get a small allowance, as long as it's not too overly generous, because there is an element of being publicly spirited about these things as well.
I'll liaise with colleagues across West and South Yorkshire to establish what remuneration they offer, to see if we can establish what's best practice across those organisations.
And certainly not the 10,000, which the when we went to that training session in York, the speaker suggested that that's what an independent member ought to be paid.
As much as the councillor gets.
Leeds advertised for one recently. I wish I'd kept the advert now, and considering their allowances generally are much higher than ours, it was actually a fairly small amount. I think it was a couple of thousand, that kind of figure.
Yeah. Right. So are we all okay with that to go forward? Yeah. Right. Thank you. And thank you very much, Lisa, and everybody else who has contributed to the meeting. And we'll now close it, and look forward to seeing you all in May at this committee, the next one.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks very much.
Chair.
Thanks.